With that, about us here, I say us, our program at Atlee High School, like he said, we've been doing this for 18 years. I started off with one class of 20 kids that I handpicked to be in our program. What we do in our program really has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk to you about, but I'm here because I have great kids. They're my staff, and we've grown our program, and we do a lot of things. Like I said, we have 8 sports fields plus a band area, so it's a 9th field, 28 acres, and we have all sorts of other events just like anybody else. We don't have concerts, but I have Special Olympics, I have Relay for Life, all those types of things. And I got people who walk dogs a lot, and I got 2 cross-country skiers who show up when it snows. So, interesting twist. This is our lacrosse field in lacrosse form. 2 days later, it ends up being a soccer field. So this is shots we took a couple years ago when we were the sporting grounds for lacrosse field of the year. That's also our football field, our field hockey field, and everything else. So my kids manage and mow all the campus facilities. We don't do grounds, we just do fields. And that's the kids I started with. So, and that's all the equipment we had. So most of that stuff was retired, except for the tractor, the mower in the middle, the 2 weed eaters. The shovels are still good. The only thing we don't have is the Dixie chopper anymore. So we still have everything we had back then. So the machine in the middle is a 1991 mower. The tractor is a 1991 tractor. And that push reel is a 1988 John Deere walk-behind push reel. So we don't have a budget either. So we kind of make stuff as we go along. So this is not going to be a presentation about cultural practices. I'm not going to talk to you about, well, I will talk to you a little bit about aeration and talk a little bit about sod work, and I'll show you how we reduced our sod work. But it's not going to be about all the things that, I'm going to talk about a fertility program, we're not going to talk about that kind of stuff. It's really about reducing those things. How do I get as much as I can out of the facility and reduce some of those inputs that we have because we have a very limited budget. So you will still need to aerate, just so you need to know these things. You're still needing to sprig and sod. You're still going to need the top dress and those other things. Those cultural practices will not disappear. We're just going to not do as much of them as we can, or when we do it, or how we've done things to eliminate all those expenses and those downtimes that we typically had. So the key points of my whole thing, and if you did my webinar, that was the big thing I wanted to communicate with people, is you got to understand what traffic is. How do you communicate with people to help reduce traffic? How do you build into an education program? How do you educate people to do things that you want them to do without them knowing that you're teaching them to do it? And then buy into what you're doing. Talk about some physical improvements, some items that we've done to make our life easier. Follow through. Jesse talked about some of the stuff. I should let Jesse just give the presentation, because a lot of what Jesse talked about was some of the things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And also explain through a team approach. And like he said in his presentation a little while ago, is talk to people. Be part of the team. And that's where I've really kind of grown. And as a coach, I appreciate it when other people talk to me about that kind of stuff. So the nightmare that we all live is the same thing day in and day out. We all have this. This is my athletic director wanting to help. And then 9 hours later, he tells me that he helped me. And then he goes, I did put sand in the ruts. So thanks a lot. I don't need that kind of help. And that was a field that we had a leaky irrigation head. I hadn't had a chance to fix it. We were going to fix it. And he went out on the tractor to mow. And then he buried it. That's the sand he put in there. So he only had one shovel. So, because the tractor with the front end loader was stuck in the mud. So, goal mouths in soccer, lacrosse, that just get beat up and nobody manages them. So we've tried to do things to help reduce a lot of this that we had from time to time in the past. And same old consistent wear patterns. This is actually when I was on vacation. I kind of check out some of the third world country athletic facilities. And this is in the Dominican Republic. So they play on things, but they don't care. They just play. And kids are like that. They'll just play. soccer field when it wasn't in lacrosse form, but we still have wear areas from lacrosse. And the face-off facility, the kickoff areas always get worn out, sideline areas. Things that we all know. This is a lacrosse practice field. It's also my middle school football field. And when it's in middle school football form, it is phenomenal. And then when lacrosse shows up, it goes downhill real fast. But we're not immune. This wasn't yesterday, but this is a picture I found online. I thought it was interesting that, people who have big budgets and access to things that I definitely don't have access to, they're no different. They still have wear on their sidelines just like everybody else. So I know I'm not unique in that situation, and most of us are in the exact same situation, and I don't have the ability to resod like they do. So what is traffic? And 2 weeks ago I found out what traffic really is when I came to work, and that's what I found. So I deal with kids who think it's fun to take their big forward drive truck and go out into 1.5 inches of snow and show people how powerful their vehicle is and doing a donut on the field. And so this got solved in 37 minutes. I got to a bunch of kids that I have in my class and I said, I need to find out who it was, when they did it, and what were they driving. And in 37 minutes, I had a name, description of the vehicle, and what class that kid was in right now. And the deputy went and talked to him. So that's traffic, and then we have to fix it. But as we know, traffic, and this is just a term, is repetitive wear in a specific location, movement of people, equipment, and vehicles over turf, which that last picture definitely means that. And my athletic director goes, what's that going to mean for us in a month? I'm like, we'll find out. So how does that traffic occur? And for me, it becomes habits of coaches. The biggest problem we all have is coaches who have habits and they can't break their habits. And if we can find a way to break into that system of, I've always done it this way, then you have a chance to make some improvements. And the nature of the game and how it's played. So we're defined like in football, the hash marks define where traffic typically is played. In high school, it's a little less because our hashes are wider. In college, it's a little worse because the hash is narrow. And in pro, it's probably the worst because the hashes are the narrowest. So the play always returns back to the center portion of the field. At least in high school, we're somewhere within that 1/3 region. But we typically see our traffic pattern between the hashes from the 25 to the 25 in all of the sports. It just depends on how much traffic you have because of the width of your hashes. You switch that to soccer, you see sideline areas where the referees run up and down, and you see those areas in front of the goal if that goalie is one of those people who sits in one place and just works his little triangle back and forth until he actually has to back up and protect a shot. And then in lacrosse, we all know where lacrosse is, face-off area, and then, of course, in the goal mouths. Women's and men's, no different. Field hockey, same thing in front of the goal, all those types of things. So, and then the other thing that we find is poor construction. I'm plagued by poor construction. I had a guy in 1991 who built our facility, and when he built the facility, he was a subpar parking lot builder, and then he became a extremely subpar athletic field builder. And so in the 27 years that our building has been there, our parking lots have tremendous potholes, and our football fields and our other practice fields don't drain because he built the parking lot poorly. So it doesn't even consistently drain poorly. It's like more consistent, consistently bad over the whole thing. So many of us are plagued by poor construction, and it was stuff that was beyond our control. And especially from the school level and the parks and recreational level, we're kind of dealt the hand that we were given, and I don't have the resources in my budget to make massive capital improvements. Counties adjacent to us, they have larger tax bases. They go through bond referendums and they make big changes because their Parks and Rec get involved and they make big changes. I don't have that access. I'm it's a growing county, but we're still fairly rural. We got about 40% of our county is still in farmland. Where I am in my community, my school has 0 kids from farms, so we're just 0 rural land. But all the tax base is right there in my community, but we share that tax base amongst the entire county. So we don't have, and our county says, our school policy is, one school can't have something if the other school doesn't. So in 1991, our school built dugouts, but because the other schools didn't have dugouts, they all got dugouts. And then our school would put lights in our baseball field, so all the other schools got lights. So we can't have one without the other. It's a level of equality. And then, like I said, budgets. And we're all limited by our budget. No matter what level we're in, we're all limited by our budgets. Does anybody here have an infinite budget? Okay. So we're all together. So the biggest thing I'd like to start with is communication. I'm a talker by nature. The kids know when I get up and start talking, they're in trouble because there's no bathroom time until I have a transition from my lesson to the next part of it. So if I get going on a good one, that kid in the back is in deep trouble. But communication is a big issue for us when you have to be effective. Okay? And this is a real shot from the area in front of my shop. I told a kid, put the pin in the tractor and put the pin in the pin. And this is what he did. He did exactly what I told him to do. He didn't do anything but what I told him to do. So not everyone has the experience that you have. And how many people have been in this situation when you tell somebody to do it and you walk away and you're like, he can't mess that up. And I know 50% of you raise your hand and say, yeah. And it's because you know what you're talking about, and you make the assumption that your worker or your team member knows exactly what you're saying. And then you walk away and you come back and you're like, that's what I get. And it's because you can't account for what they know unless you have taught them what you want them to know. And that's on me. That's on me as a teacher, making the assumption that this kid knew exactly what I was talking about. But this paints a picture of the standard American kid. They only know what you know because that's where they get their experience. But he learned he never messed that up again. Because I got off the tractor and I said, hold on 1 second, I got to take a picture. And then I showed him how to fix it. So as a coach, I learned from Eric Grambo, my first year coaching. He's now owns a construction company in South Carolina. He's super successful. And he said, Coach Moran, you're different. You tell us we suck, but then you tell us why we suck, and then you tell us how to get better. And I have never forgotten that little lesson. As cruel as he was to me when he told me that, I really learned that what I had to do is make sure that even if I told somebody they messed up, it's my responsibility to tell them how to get better. And I still live through that with what I do in class. And that's part of how we've done things at Atlee, is make sure people understand the problem. So have an open dialogue with coaches. We learned that a little while ago. A lot of us live by that. If you do not talk to your coaches, 1, they don't know you exist. 2, they don't know what resources are available to them. And 3, they don't know that they can trust you to come talk to you. So gauge their expectations. What do you want? And some coaches don't realize that what they're asking for is really dropping your level of expectation of what you had. Because we all have an expectation of what we want it to look like. And you talk to some coaches, and they don't even expect that. So if you gauge their expectations, it may save you some work. And then when you do things, they're like, whoa. And it wasn't hard to meet their needs. But if you go out there every day and try to put your best out there and make sure that you have the best, and you know you can do the best, but it also robs time from other projects you can be doing, find out from them what they want. And then as they grow with you, what you're doing is meeting their expectations, but also raising your level of performance. So sometimes it's okay not to overachieve if your customer only wants this level. And I remember my uncle runs a farm equipment business, and sometimes he gets hung up with working with a customer, and a customer will come in and he'll tell him, you don't need that. And the customer's like, I want that. Well, you don't need that. You need this. Sometimes you have to sell them what they want, not what they need, because you're going to talk yourself out of a sale or talk yourself into a corner. But if you give them what they expect in the beginning, and it's right where you want it to be, then take advantage of that expectation and just go with it. And then as they move forward, try to work with it. Every conversation is an opportunity to teach. And like Jesse said, him and I talked a little bit about our conversation, the customer service thing not long ago. And one of the things is you have an opportunity to improve a problem that be happening. You can help them, but if you don't have a conversation, you'll never have that chance to teach them something new. So every opportunity that you have it as a conversation as an opportunity to teach. And include them in the solution. I do this with parents when I have a problem with a kid. I call home, and most parents want you to fix the problem. But when you turn around on a coach and you say, what things can you do to help with this problem? Because it's a 50-50 thing. Yeah, we may have a field issue, but why do we have the field issue? Is it a practice problem? Is it a coaching expectation problem? So what can you do to help with the solution? And then when you throw them into the equation, it's really difficult for them not to take in some ownership to what's going on. And I do that with a parent sometimes. I'll call them and say, do you have any suggestions on how I should handle Bobby in class? And that parent is like, oh crap, I've got to actually help here. And for me, it puts ownership on people. And some coaches are willing to buy in. They just don't know what to do. Most of them don't have a degree in agronomy. Most of them don't have any experience other than their coaching experience and what they see on the field. They don't have any hands-on knowledge of what we're doing. And sometimes we hold it all in and we don't share. So if you share with them what you know, you may get a lot more back than you realize. But be genuine. Always try to make sure that they know that you truly care. Keep emotion out of the conversation. You know, it's really, like Jesse said too a little while ago, it's like how when you get a complaint, you take that to heart. And really it's an opportunity for you to move forward and make improvements. And I always do this. I always ask a coach when I walk out on the field and practice, it's like, how's the team doing? Did you have a good game last night? Who do you play tonight? You know, and I may know the answer, but it lets them know that you have an interest in them. And the other thing I do is I say hi to the athletes. And anytime I have a kid in class or I see a kid walking down the hallway and they're wearing a jersey, the first thing I tell them is, good game tonight. And it's a kid that I don't even know. Every one of them will tell you thank you. And that means a lot. You know, take ownership in what they're doing and be concerned about the athlete because that's the reason we're here. You know, if we're just here to make nice fields and walk off, take pictures, that's one thing. But the cool thing is when you see a kid on the field and they want to be out there, your field is their home field advantage because you've done all the work that you've done. Excuse me. Be involved in their success. Like I said, place your ego and your field on the back burner. What is it that the coaches and the players need to be successful? And if you listen, you will find out. I know absolutely nothing about the game of women's lacrosse. Nothing. I don't know why that has that funny piece of pizza in front of the goal. I don't know what the dash lines means, and don't ask me. I tell the kids, as soon as I draw it on the board, what's that? I don't know. I don't know. I can tell you how far it is. I can tell you how big the circle is. I can tell you how far it's 13 feet 2 inches from that little line to that line right there. I know all that. But don't ask me why they play the game that way. I'm going to learn, but I haven't learned yet. And all I know is when that girl gets the ball in field hockey, if she runs in front of other people, the lady's going to blow a whistle and she's going to come all the way back here for some reason. But I just draw the stuff on the field. But I'll always ask the coach, what do you want? What can I do to help you? But make sure that they know that you care about their kids being successful. And that means a lot. And that's at any level. And I say kids, any athlete that's playing on that field. And understand why you do what you do. Your job is provide them a safe, playable surface so their athletes can be successful. And that's your job. That's it. That is your job. I have two. I got to teach a kid, and I have to do that too. But that's your job. And if you understand your role, but you take ownership and you sit there and you communicate with people that what I do is important to your game, and how you perceive me is important to how we do our job. If you see me as a valuable part of your team, we're going to move forward, we're going to be successful. And that's important. It's just talking. It is just talking. And so many things today are around social media and all that kind of communication. But I will tell you, there's nothing more genuine to a kid and an athlete to tell them, I appreciate what you're doing, good luck this afternoon, and if I can help you, let me know. So genuine communication is one of the most important things that you can do for your job. And it lets you feel human. And that's important. Education. Because I'm a teacher, I have to get away from that microphone. But because I'm a teacher, I have to talk to a lot of people, and most of them are young adolescent people, but I have to deal with all sorts of user groups. And it's not, and that user group usually doesn't talk to me. They talk to my athletic director, they talk to my principal, and somehow or another I get carbon on an email, and here's what they want. It's not, can you do this? We need you to do this. So one of the things that I have to do is I get a lot of public pressure. Why can't we do this? The synthetic conversation comes up every year. I'm a natural grass person. Our entire facility is natural grass. 27 years has been natural grass, and budgets will probably keep us on natural grass for a long time. But it doesn't stop that one person sending out a post on Facebook in front of the masses and asked our school superintendent, why don't we have a synthetic field? Well, I have enough experience now in the county that our chief information officer sends me an email, and he sends it, Carbon's my former head football coach, is director of athletics at the county level, and he goes, how do I answer this question? I'm like, well, they're asking you, do you know why they're asking you the question? And they don't know, he doesn't know why. And the reason they're asking, because our county next to us passed a big bond that every high school will get a synthetic field. And it's not the school system itself is not paying for it. $0 from the school system go into that purchase. Parks and Recreation is putting the field in at the schools, and they're going to generate that revenue back in restaurants and hotel stays for weekend tournaments, that they have a whole athletic tourism business. We don't have that. But the person who sends that message to Facebook, all they want to know is, why does the school in that county have a synthetic field and our school doesn't? And they don't know the reason. So my job is to educate my information officer and my athletic director at the county level with the right information, because they don't know. So in just one 4-paragraph email reply, I explained the entire situation to them, and they were able to fully explain to that person on Facebook why we weren't going to go down that road, because we're not taking money out of student accounts to pay for an athletic facility, because we got to pay for books, teachers, all the required things the school system needs to do to make our children successful. It's not about putting plastic out on the ground. Now, if you understood the backstory, and that's what he did, he communicated that a lot better than I did. But just through a 4-paragraph email about education, my chief information officer was able to shut up a member of the community who has a very loud voice. And that was it. We haven't gotten a message since about the other schools having synthetic facilities. And so we just, through education, do your homework. Know what you're supposed to know. Be the expert. Because when you have all the answers, and none of us do, but when you have answers, that people come to you with a question, bring them up to speed on what's going on in the world. And if you do that, then it's going to help yourself out. Also, we get the thing about pesticides all the time. One of the things I do is teach all my students to be pesticide applicators. Every one of my kids that finishes my program is a certified pesticide applicator. And they correct people in the science department with that information. So they make sure that they are on the forefront of what's going on in the industry. Have an informed answer, not an emotional one, because all of us wants to give somebody a middle finger at some point. Don't lie. And you want to just go, you don't even believe the work that I do. But just go, thank you, and we'll take that in consideration. I learned that from a former football coach of mine. He's like, when a parent comes to you right after a game and they got all sorts of suggestions, you just go, thank you, and we'll take that in consideration. You've acknowledged their concern. You've appeased them by saying, I will think about it and we'll get back to you later, which I never do in that situation. You know, or if they come at you and you say, I'm sorry I feel that way, we'll always try to get better. And but you have to make sure that you don't lash out, because that emotional response can get you fired or it paints you in a negative light that it makes you seem unprofessional. Make decisions for the good of the whole, and sometimes for coaches, that's very hard. Because every coach is selfish in what they do because they want their athletes to be the best at what they do. And you have to understand that. But you have to also communicate that we're making a decision not for you, it's for all of us. And that comes down to, I had a coach who's a really good friend of mine. We had a Friday night game, and he's like, we got to play tonight. I'm like, okay, but here's going to be the downside. He's like, well, they'll be slower in the mud. I'm like, we're slow to start with. And you're going to put our team in the mud. We're going to be slower than we ever thought we'd be slow. Against a team that's fast anyway, they're just going to be less fast. And we're going to be more slow. And you want to make sure that, I said, but do you know the other side of it? 2 weeks from now, you have a team that you can beat. But if we put the field in a condition that we're going to have to struggle to recover, in 2 weeks, that game, you probably won't have a good chance to win. And you're going to put yourself in an unfair disadvantage by playing a team in the bad conditions that on a great night, you have to be perfect. And they have to be the worst. And it's not something a coach wants to hear, but sometimes everybody has a chance. But you don't want to sit there and say, the other thing, you're going to put your kid in jeopardy. Do I want to put a kid out there and get hurt in these sloppy conditions when tomorrow we know the weather is going to be better and we know that the field will drain at a certain rate? So why not wait till tomorrow? Better yet, you got a bye week next week. Let's play on Monday. Because the other thing that my athletic director looks at is how many people are going to show up to a Friday night game in the pouring rain. Maybe the parents. The band won't be there. All those other people that you want to be there to pay the bills won't be there. So you're going to take a $10,000 to $15,000 hit on a Friday night in the rain when you can wait till Monday and probably get half that. If you do it Saturday, you probably get a third of that because parents have things they're doing. People don't come out. So understand the good of the whole sometimes is better than the good of the few. And then home lawns, and we said this earlier, I'm like, people are stealing my slideshow. Home lawns are not, and parents go, well, I can do it. And I had a kid call out his parent, and he said, his dad goes, it's just grass. He goes, well, Dad, we'll be there tomorrow morning at 8:30. If you want to come out and help us, you'll see how much work we do in an hour and a half. And I'm like, Timmy, you said that to your dad? He said, don't worry, Coach, he won't be here. He won't come. He said, because he realized when I told him that it's a lot more to it than that. And Jesse talked about social media being your friend and your enemy. The thing about it is if you do use it in a positive way and you showcase what your team is doing, your players, your guys on your staff, those people working hard and making something out of nothing, then showcase that. You know, I'm not a political person. I don't put a single thing on my Twitter that has anything to do with, in my Facebook page especially, my Facebook page has things about my family and very little because I don't want people checking it out. But I'll talk about scuba diving and sports fields. And every now and then I'll put a couple floral pictures because I run a 4,000 square foot greenhouse at school. So we're having a poinsettia sale. You guys missed out on it. But we do have a spring sale coming up in the first week of May. You're more than welcome to come to. And that'll be on my Facebook and my Twitter. But promote your program. You know, promote what you're doing. Promote what your staff is doing. And if you do great things, tell people. Dr. Larkin Phillips, my first vocational director, said, Mark, if you don't toot your own horn, nobody's going to toot it for you. And if you're doing great things, make sure your people in your community know you're doing good things. And if you don't promote yourself, then you'll be invisible. And sometimes it's good to be invisible, but when you're doing things that people want to see, and sports turf is visual. You can't tell people about it, but you can show them some crazy pictures, and they're like, wow. And show people that you do the same kind of work that anybody at any level can do. It's important for your communities to know that what you're doing. Keep the core people in your loop informed. Administrators need to know what's going on, good or bad. Something goes bad, you let them know. Something's going good, let them know. But do not let your superintendent, do not let whoever's in charge of you, your manager, your director, don't let them find out from somebody else that something is not right. Own whatever happened. And if you do that, you gain fair, equitable judgment at that point. Be the person who tells the people when something went wrong, and you will have more respect, and you have them on your side. They don't like surprises. They don't. My coaches, I tell them when we're going to aerate. Okay, I try to find out their game schedule. We schedule things just like they were showing earlier, with his calendar. I have the same calendar. Mine's in Google, not in Outlook, but I color code it. I know when home teams have games. I know when we have other things going on. I know where early release days are because those are important for teachers. But I make sure that we have work scheduled when they're away. And if they change the schedule, it's dynamically updated, so all that stuff happens. Our workers, my workers, are my students. Your workers are your staff. Make sure that they are educated in why we're doing what we're doing. If you're sanding, putting top dressing down, your cores, however you're doing it, whatever you're doing, make sure they understand the cultural practices and why that's happening. Don't just tell them to go out and aerate. If they ask you, why do we aerate? You tell them. Because that's the person who more than likely is going to have that face-to-face interaction with that end user. And it's always good to be able to tell somebody to their face why we're doing something. It makes you sound professional, because you are, and it makes you look like the professional in what you're doing. It's just important for people to know why you're doing things. And it's always nice when a high school kid can tell somebody who's an adult why we're doing what we're doing in my world. But it's no different than your staff members knowing exactly what you're doing. It's impressive, too, when somebody is putting down a pesticide, and if somebody comes up to you and says, why are you doing that? And you have the answer, they will back off. So if you're putting fertilizer down, know what you're putting down, all that kind of stuff. So make sure your workers and anybody else can help answer questions before you have to answer them. I had a situation, I teach kids to use a sprayer, and to prove a point, I load blue water into our sprayer, and I go out and I spray right in front of the school by the highway. One, I want to show kids that public pressure is crazy, and we'll get one phone call at least to the school about what are they spraying, why they're spraying it, and all that kind of stuff. But I make sure before I do that, I tell the secretary in the office, you can get a phone call, we're spraying water, we're teaching kids how to use a sprayer. And then I tell the principal it's going to happen and all that kind of stuff. And we get one person, if not two, that call in about it. But the thing about it is the kids know how to do that kind of stuff. And if you're teaching people, then we want to make sure that they learn it and they know why. So be an educator at everything that you do. You don't have to be a teacher by profession, but be an educator that teaches people why we're doing every step of the way. So with that, we run into people. I have people now that contact us and want to know, how can I fix my lacrosse goals? And that's where we've had a lot of success lately. And a lot of it is we reduce our traffic by using simple things. Tools, okay? Not big practices, but tools. Signage, okay? How many people use signs to try to keep people off, okay? A sign is just like a lock. A lock keeps an honest person honest. Same thing with a picket fence, same like a 4-foot chain link fence should never be even used, because anybody and their brother can hop over it. But it's an implied barrier, and it makes it seem like I shouldn't be out there. Plus, when you walk out there and there's 17 people on your field throwing a Frisbee at 9:30 at night, and they go, I didn't know I couldn't be here. And I just walk over to the sign with my phone on my light, and I go, field closed, keep off, no trespassing. On 4 locations on the field. I said, you go to this school, right? You in our IB program? Yes, sir. You can read then, right? Yeah. Take my light back. And I just played dumb. I'm like, no trespassing. Field closed. Keep off. Can you read that? Well, I didn't know that meant me. What do you mean it didn't mean you? It doesn't say anything on the fine print on the bottom says, except you. But a sign, even though it can only work for people who are honest, sometimes can be very effective. And if they're nicely done, printed, not handwritten, but go to a local sign shop, get a couple made, and put them out, and it helps people realize that this field is closed. It's not going to work all the time, but it's an implied barrier. Roping off, I have to do that for track. Our track facility is also our stadium. And when we have a track event, we'll have 7 or 10 track teams there with a bazillion people. And they always want to do their warm-ups out on the field. And one of the things that we know is like the next day we're going to have a soccer event, or we're going to have a lacrosse event with at least 2, a JV and a varsity game. So we're going to have a lot of teams out there. One of the things we want to do is protect that field and keep as little traffic on it as possible. So we try to make sure we put barrier ropes up. So part of what we do is just go out there 2 hours before the track meet, put a yellow cheap barrier rope up, and it's a barrier. Will people go over it? Yes. But it's still going to reduce the amount of people who go out there. Like I said, it's a lock that's going to keep an honest person honest. So you'll keep a lot of folks off. Barricades, fencing, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people use snow fencing. One of the things we use in our athletic events, made a bunch of PVC barriers. And it's just 2-inch PVC with a bunch of T-fittings and 90s. And it's amazing they weigh like 3 pounds. But it's amazing how good they are at controlling traffic and keeping people moving. They don't go through it. So it's pretty ineffective, and then we can flatten them out and hang them up on a wall, and then we just set them back up after a game. And then any type of fencing if you have. So keep off signs, we just spoke about that. Understand trespassing laws. Did anybody have, I was talking to Crockett earlier about our school system. Our school is private property, so you can't just come on a campus. That's one of the reasons we can keep kids safe. So we have no trespassing laws on our school grounds. So everybody who comes to campus has to report to the main office. If not, you're considered a trespasser, and legally we can remove you in the back of a white police car. So most school systems are considered private property because they're owned by a school district or our county district that provides them funding or however it worked out. But you need to communicate with law enforcement. Like when the snow stuff happens, I call the deputies and I tell them, can you please check out campus for me at least twice during the snow event if possible. We call it a non-emergency number. They check it out. But those that indicate hours of operation, that's important. We have our track gets used from time to time, so it's open from this time to this time on certain schedules. And also the limited use to confined areas. It authors usage of signs, all that kind of stuff. So things that just tell people, we're open, we're not open. If you're going to use our facility, you have to have a form signed in. I came to school one day on a Sunday, and there was a softball tournament going on. The softball coach didn't know about it. And it was an AAU game. There were people who went over the fence with chairs. Even the umpire went over the fence, and he called the game. And I guess whomever told him, they forgot to open the gate. So everybody who was at the game, 2 teams and an umpire, climbed a fence. At some point you go, maybe we shouldn't be here. And I get there and I unlock the gate. And I'm pretty sure the little old lady that was out there who came over in her bag chair was happy I opened the gate up for her so she can get out. But I walked out and I found a coach and I'm like, why are you here? And they go, we thought it was public property. We thought we could use the field. I'm like, well, didn't you see the fence locked? Well, we didn't know. They claim ignorance, but they were trespassing. So I wasn't a jerk. I called our softball coach. He came up there and kind of oversaw some things, and we called the deputy and said, here's what's going on. So we had some backup, but we let it play out because it would have been a public relations nightmare if I'd ended the event and kicked them all out. But it was just one of those things, and they weren't supposed to be there. Anybody else had to run into stuff like that where people just show up and do things, and you're like, it's like crazy. I was telling somebody earlier, we had some people came out on our track with a car. And I said, I found them, and I go, why are you here? And they're like, well, somebody left the gate open. I'm like, this ain't Bristol. You just can't go make laps in your Honda, and then when you get done, just head on out. And it's crazy. People are weird. It's just crazy what people will do. So if barriers are physical obstacles, we know this. Understand that no barrier is perfect, keeps an honest person honest. And then sometimes it's budget. How much money do you have to do that kind of stuff? Fences are expensive, and maintaining fences can be a problem as well. So just simple signs that I've seen out there. I made mine. I got somebody make me some vinyl decals, and we just made them up. They're just, we use real estate size signs that makes big, and they're easy and heavy enough. They're durable So the communication part for me, work with coaches and sponsors, education of athletic groups, little leagues will call us from time to time. They want to play on our baseball stadium. I deal with Special Olympics, and it's not the athletes that worry me, it's the parents that show up and they want to do all this crazy stuff and put a big flaming, and we don't plan on those types of things. They have lots of grand ideas, and we have to make sure that we have the facility set up so they can do some of the things they want to do, because we want to work with them. And one of the things that I have to do is work with specific athletes to be responsible for their areas. This works a lot in baseball. I told baseball pitchers, you're responsible for the mound. Catcher's responsible for home plate. First base for the first base area, second base area, shortstop, third, so on and so forth. And you make everybody part of the team. And I know that's harder. You can't do that really at the professional level and the collegiate level, but at the high school level and the Parks and Rec level, there's lots of opportunities for you to utilize athletes to maintain those facilities. But we also work with a traffic plan. I'll share my traffic plan with you. It's similar to what a lot of people probably use, but I put it on paper and I gave it to a coach. And now it's just not me telling you what to do. Now you have a visual thing that connects people with what we're doing. So I sent this out to soccer coaches, and it's got a lot of words on it. Basically, it says, at our school, we've been successful with trying to manage our practice facilities, because one of the things that we did when I took over in 2001, everybody was using the stadium because the stadium was the best place. Well, it was only the best place because it had lights. None of the coaches wanted to use the practice fields in the spring, early spring sports, because the sun went down early and they didn't have enough light and all this other stuff. And then the field became deteriorated and it wasn't nearly as productive and as effective as it was before. So thing that I did with them was I closed the stadium to practice. But I told them when I closed the stadium for practice, I promised to make sure the practice fields are in better condition. So we improved our practice facilities tenfold. And then the stadium became better and more playable. But the other thing we did was we encouraged them not just to use the standard field. Instead, I watched people practice, and I'd watch these soccer coaches, and I learned a lot. My biggest fear when I made the conversion to closing facilities was the soccer people are going to eat me alive. And when I found the best people, and if you had told me this when I started, I'd been saying, you're a liar, no way it's going to happen. But the soccer people for me were the best people to work with. Because I came and watched practice, and I watched them, and they do a lot of half-field stuff, offense versus defense. And they take the goals, and they play on a short field. So what I told them was, why don't we turn your field 90 degrees? We'll keep the big one out there, and you use that for your big full-game scrimmages and that kind of stuff. But why don't we turn the field 90 degrees? We'll put a goal over here. We'll put a goal over there. And we can have two soccer teams playing at the same time. And I'm like, if you play just a half-field scrimmage and not a full short-field scrimmage, you've got Monday, you've got Tuesday, you've got Wednesday, you've got Thursday, and Friday you run the whole thing. Or however you want to rotate it. And then next week, slide over 10 yards and reset the goal. So the goals are portable goals, and we just move them up and down the field. And if the coaches don't want to move them, I tell them, I will move them for you. You come out today, they'll be 10 yards to the right or to the left of where you were before. So that field is constantly sliding. The other thing that I do, one of the things I encourage, and one of the slides I'll show you, is cones. I'm a firm believer in coaches using cones. I'm that way because as a football coach now, I've learned cones make my practice portable. I can move it all around. So I do super lines. I do an 18-foot line and I do a 6-yard and an 18-yard line. And I run it all the way down the field. Same thing on the other side. So I have two super lines on each side of the field that run the entire length. And then I just cone off where the top of the goal box is and the top of the penalty box is. And then if you move that goal over 10 feet or 10 yards, you reset your big box and your small box with cones. And you've got a whole new field. And you break that habit of always staying in one place. And how cheap is a stack of cones? You can buy them right now on Amazon for $10 for a stack of flat cones. I didn't spend any money on fertilizer. I didn't spend any more money on grass seed. I didn't aerate. I didn't do any cultural practices. But all I did was change a bad habit that coaches have. So work with coaches and encourage them to rotate. Band is another group that are the worst. when it comes to habits, because they want to be on the 50. And I get the answer from our band director. He's like, we got to be on the 50. So I have an orange pylon that says 50. And I go out on the 30-yard line, and I put a 50. I said, there's your 50. He goes, well, we need to be in the tower. Well, the press box sits right here. You can see your team, your group right there. We've got bleachers on the visitor side. They can do the same thing. The only time they can use the 50 on the home side is on a Friday night game when varsity's playing. Other than that, when they have their Tuesday practices at my stadium, they have to be here 1 week, there the next, there the next, there the next. 4 weeks on a rotation, and they never get to the 50. And it's just a simple rotation, and I just take the pylon, and they don't have to think. Boom, there it is. Put that orange triangle right where it needs to be. This is the 50. And we didn't spend any money on fertilizer. We didn't spend any money on grass seed. We didn't do anything but move a cone and tell them this is where the home is today. And it's a simple thing, but they hated it at first because it wasn't what they were used to. How many people paint the parking lot? Okay, a lot of times in high schools they'll paint a parking lot, but they don't have a point of view. They don't have a visual aspect of where they can see things. But this still gives them their reference point from the tower, but they can still see everything they need to see, and they're not in that spot that gets worn out. And they're only out there 2 hours, and it's a rough 2 hours, but it's 2 hours a week in that spot. Next week, they're in a different spot, so the field has a chance to recover. Lacrosse is similar. We paint our lacrosse fields sideways, so I do a men's and women's lacrosse marking, men's and women's over there, so it rotates different days. So I have 4 fields and a 5-day practice schedule, and then they use the 5th day, the full scrimmage. I don't care when they do full scrimmage. Most of the coaches now realize we don't do full scrimmage anyway, so what's it matter? I have men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse on the same field on the same day. So both my varsity lacrosse programs practice on one field. It happens to be the field that I coach on in the springtime for middle school football. So this field gets more looks now than it ever got. But it's just rotation. And it's a plan. I put it on paper and I give it to them. And then when I go out, I set the goals in whatever mouth they need to be in, not on the full field mouth. So here's a kind of an aerial shot, and it's dark, I know. I have a drone, and that's helpful for people telling you that I don't do that. Okay, well, here's the aerial image of what you've been doing. And it's not hard to argue. We've got here, where I've been catching them not using the side areas. And come to find out it was a local user group coming up here on the weekends, and we fixed that. But you can see where this area here and here are worn out. These areas right here hadn't been set foot in too much. This was early in the season. So we had to remedy that with a conversation between myself, the athletic director, and the coaching staff. We had a brand new coach. A women's lacrosse coach was brand new, and he didn't see the full picture. But this helped paint that picture for him. The thing we run into with out of school user groups using our goals, went and got a 3-foot piece of cable with 2 loops on the ends of them, wrapped it around them, put a padlock. So we chained the goals face to face at the end of practice next to our football goals at the end of each of the fields. So if somebody wants to drag it out there, they better bring the bolt cutters and everything else. So can it be broken? Yes. But they're going to have to, I don't know many lacrosse kids who show up on their bikes and their sticks. They got a red handle set of bolt cutters with them to move the goals. So it's just little things that help alleviate that secondary level of traffic. And then we have one for PE too. We got a PE rotation that's on our lower practice field next to our tennis courts next to the school. We just tell them little areas that they can use. Don't use the whole field. So they run side to side. And then on Fridays, let them have the whole thing. So, and if it's raining, they don't go out. If it's cold, they don't go out. All that kind of stuff. That's stuff that they do. But we still have a plan in place. So, Innovate. Help coaches learn to coach again. And practice ideas, so turning that practice sideways. My football coach defensive coordinators are the worst, because defensive coordinators by nature don't want to move because that means they're losing. So defensive coordinators like to anchor down, and they like to let the scout team offense run at them, but they don't ever want to move. So one of the things that I talked to my coach about was, I don't want you sitting here, so run your scout team offense in a real-life offensive situation and move the field. So they drive the field no matter what. It forces kids in a game situation, and I explain it to them, if you practice game situations where you have to get up, reset to a new spot, and recall your defense, it makes kids get in the habit of not being lazy and always going back to the same spot. So if you teach them that this will improve your game preparation by constantly moving, then they will start to evolve into a mobile defensive coordinator. And I think that's what everybody wants who manages high school football fields, who have a defensive coordinator who anchors down. Offensively now, with high motion offenses and those types of sports that are constantly in motion, teaching coaches to coach again is really important. Alternative markings, so cones, okay, all that kind of stuff. The biggest thing that's coming out that I've really found helpful is the pop-up crease. Has anybody used these portable creases before? They're like $110, $150. I don't paint circles anymore on soccer creases. We have 4 of these in our lacrosse program. Coach just walks out. There they go. On the field they go, and they got a crease. And it has helped us tremendously. And in pregame, we don't let our teams pregame in the painted creases at the stadium. They can only pregame in one of these pop-up creases. It's a quick goal or something like that. But then you have the pop-up nets, too, that are helpful, moving stuff around. Organize, keep a calendar, keep a detailed plan. So explain, coaches, your plans, make sure they buy into what you're doing, make them part of the solution, make a plan, commit to the plan, make them part, okay, I got 5 minutes, so I'll speed up. Physical improvements, traffic zone renovations, we've had to do some of that stuff. All that things, we do a pitchfork thing. Mike Skelton at Culpeper Parks, he always goes out with in the soccer goal mouths and hand pitchforks their goals ahead of time. So it softens them up. We did build ourselves an air spike. So we do some of that air spike stuff, some top dressing. We're looking at trying wetting agents and some of those things. And we're working on now, we have Vaymont Bermuda grass from way back. And we've started putting in some Patriot, some Latitude and Northbridge in our goal mouth areas for recovery. So these are kids fixing our goal. This year our sod was cut in half with the practices we went. So the sod area was like 30 feet by 20 feet. Now we reduced it down to a 20 foot by 20 foot area. So we've reduced it considerably when you're talking about time. The new spot that we did this year was only half that. Deliver, make sure you follow through, do what you say you're going to do, and don't be afraid to be bold. And then a team approach, make sure you thank them, thank the coaches, thank the players, thank your staff, make sure they're appreciated, and then make them a part of the solution. And then do the unexpected. This is my last little pitch here. At least once in a season, do something that no one expects you to do. Surprise somebody. So if you can, tell no one. Don't tell anybody you're going to do it. Make it a top secret mission. And I tell kids, if you tell anybody, you don't get no t-shirts this year. And as Disney says, plus it. So what we did, we went out and we did All-America theme for a football game, and we jazzed it up, and that's what our end zones looked like. But then we did that for the numbers as well. Told no one. Didn't tell the head football coach and nobody. They showed up to the game, and that's what we had. I had a friend of mine who's a firefighter, passed away 3 weeks after we did this. He sent me an email, I still have it, and he said that was the most badass thing I'd seen in a long time. And he's a former Army Ranger and all that kind of stuff. It was really cool. And that's what it looked like from space. So, and that's it. So questions at all? We're on Twitter, Atlee Turf. Follow us on Twitter. We're on Facebook too. Look up Atlee High School Horticulture. But happy to ask any questions. I know I didn't tell you what kind of fertilizer to put down and how much top dressing we had, but if anything at all, happy to answer a question or two.